Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our weekly speaker series for the Paranormal Research Symposium. I am your host, Alex Matsuo, and I am the symposium chair and the founder of the Association of Paranormal Study. And I am so excited to have you joining us tonight as we continue our countdown to the symposium happening on Saturday, August 23rd in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Each week, we've been featuring the brilliant voices that are shaping this year's event. And tonight, we are diving deep into the intersection of Indigenous history, spirituality, and the paranormal. So, tonight, we're joined by Dr. Sean M. Daley, an applied sociocultural anthropologist and American Indian Studies scholar, who, along with his research partner, has consulted on the paranormal and supernatural cases across the United States since the early 2000s. We also have Dr. Christine M. Daley, an applied medical anthropologist and implementation scientist whose work in Indigenous communities examines how beliefs in the supernatural influence approaches to health and disease. And then we have Dr. Ryan Goeckner. I hope I said your name right. I'm so sorry. A cultural anthropologist exploring how religious, spiritual, and paranormal beliefs shape health, identity, and lived experience through ethnographic research. So their talk is going to introduce us to 4 Indigenous phenomena from Pennsylvania, and I'll let them dive deeper on that. And they also are going to be exploring how these beings are understood in Indigenous versus non-Indigenous communities, and how we can respectfully integrate oral traditions into paranormal research. Before we really get rolling, though, I have to give a shout out and a huge thank you to our sponsors for making the Paranormal Research Symposium possible. We have Ghostly Images of Gettysburg, Ghosted Magazine, Gold Dust Publishing, Lauren Hantz, and Boo Sisters Podcast. Also, once again, tickets are still available until August 22nd, so be sure to grab your tickets before we sell out. And we are over 50, actually, we're actually over 75% sold out now. So, we got just a few tickets left, believe it or not, friends. So, which is also equally exciting. All right, I am super excited to welcome Sean, Chris, and Ryan to the stream. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Well,
How, how are y'all doing tonight?
Good.
good.
Good. Good. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. I had mentioned before we had gone live, I was really excited to see your abstracts. They actually submitted a couple, your abstracts, and you all being interested in being part of the symposium. So I'm really excited that y'all are here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, first of all, for our viewers who may not know your work yet, would you mind giving us an introduction in your words on your origin story?
Who wants to start?
You should. You're the lead author.
You talk first.
All right. So our story is a collective story. The three of us have been working together for years. Chris and I started working together back in 1993. We met in college and did college, grad school, all that stuff together. Ryan, we met back when we were in Kansas prior to moving to Pennsylvania. And all three of us are in Pennsylvania now. And he's been working with us for a good, probably close to 15 years now. Yeah. We kind of come at this at a little different angle than maybe some of your other guests. We're anthropologists first and foremost. And we kind of, over the years, kind of got our feet wet in the paranormal and kind of developed from there. And Ryan's son, Rowan, apparently is talking, the little baby. So he's going to be a future researcher with us. So for the most part, we've worked with American Indian peoples. We were out west for most of our careers, and we migrated to Pennsylvania. Me and Chris about 5 years ago, Ryan about 4 years ago. And we still predominantly work with people, Native communities out west. This project is kind of a spin-off of project we're actually doing for the state government in Pennsylvania, the Bureau of Community and Economic Development. They were interested in exploring some indigenous tourism here in Pennsylvania. And as we started to kind of look at Indigenous tourism, we realized that some of our interest in the paranormal kind of dovetailed with it, particularly cryptids and certain spiritual beings that some of the indigenous groups in Pennsylvania, have in their cultural traditions. So yeah, that's kind of how this all came about. It's part of a tourism project, and as we've seen over the past decade or so, maybe even a little longer, and Ryan knows more about this than me, this cultural heritage tourism, the dark tourism, the ghostly tourism, that's kind of blown up. And so we kind of been trying to gear the state government here in Pennsylvania to consider maybe adding that to their agenda.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if they're actually considering it. We're trying
one of the things we struggle with in Pennsylvania is we don't currently have any federally recognized Indian tribes. We don't have any reservations. So all the groups that are involved in this project are now in New York, Oklahoma, or Wisconsin. All the native communities here got relocated. So there's that negotiation of tradition, oral tradition passed here with, where the tribes are now with new cultural traditions. So we're negotiating that while we're negotiating the tourism. So it's not a bad thing. It's just a little bit more complicated because some of the cryptids we bring up in the presentation have kind of, their beliefs have changed, the way they deal with them has changed because they're no longer here in Pennsylvania, the indigenous peoples. So
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Sean. Chris or Ryan, did you want to go next?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Sure. Yeah. Remind me of the question. Sorry.
Yeah, your origin story. It's all good. You're new, new baby. It's all good.
Yeah. It's a new baby and a toddler. It's rough over here. I, like Sean said, I met Sean and Chris back in 2011, I think, or somewhere in there, and started working with them on their Indigenous focused stuff. But I also had interest in the paranormal, and Sean taught a course on the paranormal, and so I took the class and kind of just ran with it, and kind of just hung around. I've kind of always been into paranormal stuff, even when I was a kid. Like I can remember the first time I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film, and it totally blew my mind. And so, it's just something I've always been kind of into, and it kind of wove through a lot of my undergraduate and graduate training in like very sort of hidden sort of ways, I guess, because I also have interest in religion, not as from a theological perspective, but from an academic perspective. That's always, been something that's run through a lot of my interests. And so paranormal, supernatural, and religion go hand in hand, and oftentimes in most communities are one and the same. And so that kind of just went through or runs through all of my research and interests. And so even with my master's thesis that was about the Dakota Access Pipeline protest movement, I had people talking to me about spiritual experiences they were having during the protests and stuff when my project wasn't at all about the paranormal.
Oh, wow. I would love to like dive deeper into that. If there's any writings on it or anything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. All right, Chris.
Well, first I have a question for you. I keep seeing a cat walk around in the background.
Yes.
I knew that was coming.
Someone who has 4 of them, I need to ask the name.
Oh, yes. The one who keeps walking behind, he's actually sitting on a box now, is Gouda. He's actually a Hemingway cat, so he has extra toes.
Yeah.
He's got little thumbs.
Anyway, just had to ask.
I wondered how long.
So you're good.
I wondered how long we'd make it into this before Chris asked. Honestly, 11 minutes was longer than I thought.
Yeah, so I bring a little bit of a different perspective to the table when we do our paranormal work. I'm not a sociocultural anthropologist like both of them. I'm a medical anthropologist. So I sort of live at the intersection of culture and biology and medicine.
Nice.
So I come at this from a healing perspective and sort of looking at, how people's medical systems, healing systems often incorporate the spiritual and incorporate the paranormal. I mean, our Western medicine, biomedicine, allopathic medicine, whatever you want to call it, when we go to the doctor, they tend to not think about any of those things. And in fact, when you bring up spiritual things, supernatural things, you get sent to a psychiatrist, or you get told to go talk to your priest or your minister or your rabbi or whomever. That doesn't happen in any other culture in the world. In every other culture, healing is integrated into sort of every aspect of life, certainly into religion, and definitely encompassing some paranormal and supernatural phenomena within it. And so that's kind of the perspective I came from to get here. But yeah, I've been working with Indigenous communities, forever.
Nice.
But again, from the health perspective. So.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating too. So you bring in a different you bring a different lens to the research too. So that's really awesome. Nice. Just want to remind everyone too, this is an interactive show, so feel free to use the chat if you like to ask a question, and then you can be featured just like John Michael here. He's usually hanging out from YouTube, so he's crossed over into Facebook now. So watch out, everyone. All right. So my first question for all of you is, can you give us a high-level overview of your presentation for the symposium? And I know you touched on this a little bit previously, but maybe we could dive deeper. And what inspired you to focus on Indigenous paranormal phenomena in Pennsylvania?
Anyone?
Lead author, bro. This is all you.
All right. I might be lead author, but
you can. We can provide an assist, but you're gonna have to carry the ball for a minute.
All right. What we were just trying to think outside the box, as far as tourism goes. Again, a lot of what we do is this intersection of the paranormal, supernatural, anomalous, whatever you want to call it, with Indigenous culture, Indigenous religions, spiritualities. Some of it was self-serving in the fact that Pennsylvania was an opportunity for us to learn something new. Again, we've worked primarily out west. Me and Chris have done the bulk of our work in Arizona, Kansas, South Dakota. Ryan has done a lot of work in Kansas and South Dakota. So this was a new area for us to get interested in and kind of develop. And around here where we are in Eastern Pennsylvania, we're about an hour north of Philly. We hear a lot about the Jersey Devil or the Leeds Devil. We hear a lot about Mothman because, West Virginia is not that far from here. But we also have some, for lack of a better word, cryptids around here, something called the Albert Witch, which is similar. You're familiar with them, okay?
I am, yeah.
Okay, we have the Albert Witch here. We have something called the Broadtop Snake, which seems like it may actually tie back to something called a Machondo, which is in Iroquois and Lenape traditions. So we were trying to continue to learn ourselves while bringing something interesting to this tourism project. Because one of the things we've noticed about Pennsylvania, and I don't mean this as a slam, but if it goes past Ben Franklin or William Penn, nobody's interested. They want to see reenactors.
And Gettysburg. Hold on. We got to throw some love to Gettysburg.
Well, I'm just talking about Indigenous stuff. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're right.
Civil War. Absolutely. We got a whole bunch going on there. So if you want to go ring, a Liberty Bell or see Ben Franklin sign a fake treaty, we got plenty of that. But to bring it to a contemporary perspective, to look at what these traditions may look like today, no one's doing that. And we thought the Pennsylvania Tourism Office might be interested in that because it is something new and other places are doing this. We see this indigenous tourism going on in New Mexico, Arizona, Oklahoma, and, even Ohio and Illinois starting to delve into it a little bit. So we were just trying to do something new. And as things went on, we decided there's a whole bunch of cryptids that we could focus on, but we really wanted to look at the Machondo, which is a horned serpent, the Alba Witch, Little People, and Thunderbirds. There's a lot of Thunderbird sightings out here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in there because one thing Sean didn't mention is that, when a lot of our experiences out west, people talk about, all sorts of paranormal phenomena and try to associate it back to, some sort of indigenous oral tradition or this idea of Indian burial grounds. We did a lot of work at the Sally House. If you're familiar with the Sally House, we worked with them for a long time and heard all of the stories that there are to be told about the Sally House, and many of which are not substantiated by much of anything. But we would hear stories about oh, there's a ghost Indian in the backyard, and it's like, okay. And we used to work with or we have Native folks that work with us, and we used to have a guy that came with us on those investigations. We'd be like, oh yeah, we brought him, he's just in the backyard. But all that's to say that there's a lot of like misconceptions about indigenous traditions, and a lot of folks get their knowledge of indigenous histories and beliefs from one or two really not so great sources from like the turn of the 20th century. And so in our experience, a lot of times things get shifted or twisted around to mean things that they really don't in indigenous communities or the communities that like hold these beliefs. I think skinwalkers is like the really big one too, that gets thrown around a lot. But there's a rich cultural tradition around skinwalkers that is largely divorced from a lot of what people talk about when they discuss skinwalkers, particularly the Skinwalker Ranch, which is its whole thing. And so that was one thing that really kind of drove some of what we wanted to do with this project too, is, kind of talking about, especially in a context like Pennsylvania, where, like Sean said, there's not a robust indigenous community, where you may not run into an indigenous person the whole time you're in the state of Pennsylvania. Whereas where we were at in Kansas, you ran into Native folks. And so it's kind of a bigger step to get folks here thinking about that in a way. And so that was something that kind of we wanted to really work on with this project.
And just to jump in off of what Ryan is saying, one of the things that we run into a lot is, as he mentioned, people might be looking at things from the turn of the century, but there's this way that people talk about and think about Native folks that is like they are history.
Yeah.
In other words, there's nothing contemporary going on. And so when you look at things like the paranormal, there is a hugely rich tradition of paranormal and supernatural beliefs in contemporary indigenous communities, not in the past, but today. And that's certainly true from the healing standpoint. It's also true from the opposite of the healing standpoint. And it's very contemporary. And that I think is something that's really important to remember, because everybody thinks like, oh, you guys are like reading books. And no, I mean, yeah, we read, but
I mean, read a lot. I mean, I read a lot.
But the reality is the work that we do is very contemporary based. It's really not, it's not historical in nature.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate these answers too, because, and actually, Ryan, it was almost like you were looking at my notes, because I was going to ask about some of the most common misconceptions that non-Indigenous people have about Indigenous communities and folklore. So, and you touched on this beautifully, especially with there's a lot of liberal usage of skinwalkers, Wendigo, and I'm originally from Southern California, so the Kumeyaay, and so very, very familiar with some of the traditions and the culture and folklore. But yeah, so you all are speaking my love language right now. So especially with the Indian burial ground trope and how so often it's being used and dare I say bastardized, especially in paranormal culture and tourism. It's like, ooh, very like, oh, so scary and whatnot. I wanted to dive deeper into that actually. So I wanted to like hear, what are y'all thoughts on that, I guess, it's not necessarily, it's not a new evolution, but it seems to be used a lot more often, especially with, movies like the Amityville Horror and, these
Mhm.
horror films and stories that have kind of fed into this, and kind of the effect on how Indigenous people are, how it affects them culturally too. So just want to get pick your brains on that.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, so it's interesting that you mentioned that, the examples that you mentioned that are, literary, because the idea of the Indian burial ground trope is really a literary invention that traces its way back to like early 18th century literature in what became the United States, right? And it, got carried all the way through to, contemporary times with, I love Stephen King, but like Pet Sematary, bro, like, come on, that was weak. You could have done better there. So it got carried through to even stuff today, and it's really exciting to see. This is just kind of an aside, but to see authors like Stephen Graham Jones as an Indigenous person writing books that are horror from an Indigenous lens, that are so awesome and so much better and beyond the Indian burial ground trope. But yeah, that's something that we see like through literature all throughout the United States, both contemporarily, but less so. And it's kind of bled into this like popular fascination with Indigenous folks. And I think some of it comes from, this assumption that Native folks are super spiritual and that they're like more spiritual than other groups of people, which they're like everybody else. You got folks that are super spiritual and folks who aren't, and everybody in between. And so I think like that's, I think that's something to consider when you hear people talking about it. And then the other piece that I'll throw in before I pass this off to Sean and Chris is that, there is this assumption in the trope itself of a burial. And a lot of Indigenous communities, their funerary traditions didn't include a burial like we would think of them. So some of the communities we've worked with up in the Northern Plains, would build scaffolds and put bodies up above the ground. And so there wasn't actually a physical burial where someone dug a hole or even built like a rock cairn over someone's body. And so the idea of a burial is kind of weird in that sense, because I mean, when we were out in the Midwest, it was like, a lot of these tribes out here didn't do that. And so for us to be saying that, that's why some places haunted is kind of shows that lack of cultural understanding, really, both historically and contemporarily. But yeah, I'll let that to somebody else before I talk forever.
I think part of the question was about, if I'm remembering correctly, how Native people today, view this. And honestly, it's kind of insulting to a lot of folks. Kind of like the mascot thing, but other things as well, and the idea that we have that everything is haunted because it's an Indian burial ground. That's insulting. And even to say, you're on land that there's probably Indians buried on. Well, the whole country had Native people, and there were people who died all over the place. And there were burials, there were scaffolds, there were a variety of different things. And if that's why you're coming to this location is to interact with Native spirits, why are you bothering them? I mean, if that's really why you're going, if you're there because you think that there's Native people who were buried there, why do we keep bothering them? It's kind of like, all right, I'm going to say a little bit about archaeologists right now.
Hey.
Let's go dig up people's bones. Why? Let's go take the sacred objects that were buried with folks. Why? And then, the location's haunted because you just pissed them off because you took all their sacred objects. But anyway.
Just saying.
We got 25 minutes before we dug on archaeology. That's good for us.
That was pretty good.
No, that's a record.
Nice. All right.
I don't think I really have anything to add to that. I think you guys hit it. So.
Okay. Nice. Thank you for that, for your answers to that question. All right, we got a question from John Michael has questions. So I'm glad he has questions. Do you guys research the paranormal from just a folkloric perspective, or do you research it from an ontological perspective as well? It's bringing in the big
Yeah, I would say folkloric is probably the least we do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, we tend to use the word oral tradition or oral history in our line, but I see where he's going with that. Um, Honestly, I think we do most of our research through sitting down with the people from these communities and talking to them. In anthropology, we call it ethnographic. That's kind of how we do our stuff. Again, I'm not going to throw shade at books. There are some good books out there written by historians, religious scholars, things like that. And we'll read them. But at the end of the day, we do more by interacting with these communities, these cultures, and learning one-on-one from them. That's kind of what we do as anthropologists. Um, you know, we want to read about something, but after we read about it, we want to go do it then.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough for at least me and Ryan, and I know Chris comes at it a little bit differently as a medical anthropologist, but she's still the same way. It's great to read about a native tradition, but reading can only take you so far. You need to go and be with the people whose tradition it is and learn from them. Because again, a lot of these books, there's a great historian from Pennsylvania who's written a ton on cryptids here. His name's Henry Shoemaker. Wrote in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Prolific author, wrote over 100 articles and books. Problem was he totally bought into the noble savage stereotype. So he took these stories and made them more than they were so that white people bought into it. And he preserved these stories, but now we're going back and reconstructing these stories by talking with Lenape, Haudenosaunee, or Iroquois, Shawnee people, because he took their stories and revamped them for a white audience. So by interacting with these communities we work with and learning about the religion, the paranormal from them, what we're trying to do is be more legitimate in what we bring, because kind of what I view us as, and they can disagree with me, but as somebody who does this work, I kind of view myself almost as a mediator or an interpreter. I have to bring things from a native community to a non-native community and do it in a way that respects the native approach, but is understandable by non-natives who, like Ryan said, in Pennsylvania, somebody who may be 30, 40 years old and never been to a legit native community or has ever dealt with native people. So we walk that translator mediator line, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing to that too, is, we really, one of the things that drives the type of work that we do is that we're really interested in people's experiences as they have them. And so we're not in necessarily the business of sort of like debunking people's experiences or sort of saying, oh, well, this way of being in the world or this way of existence is right or wrong. And so like, that's really what Sean's getting at there when he's talking about us being kind of mediators or translators, right? Is that our goal is really to understand, what is it ontologically that makes a Lakota person have this relationship with, buffalo or other beings in their environment, right? And not necessarily like, oh, what does that mean for like the greater whole of our understanding of existence, if that makes sense. I think that's kind of what you're asking.
Yeah.
We also do a lot of things from a cross-cultural perspective. When working with Native folks, trying to understand, there's different, obviously, there's 570 some odd different Native groups. They all have different cultures, but there are commonalities across. And so some of what we do is try to look across different Indigenous groups to see what similarities there are, what differences there are, and try to understand sort of what's going on. And I'll just throw in, we actually just completed data collection, we'll call it interviews, where we were asking a bunch of Indigenous folks about their paranormal beliefs and their paranormal experiences, and as well as some other sort of health related things. And we've done over 500 interviews. So now it's time to like delve into it and really learn what everybody said. And I'm really excited about that. And it'll be really interesting to see how things look when you look across the different cultures, because we have people from all over the country that we talked with.
That's amazing. Wow. Cool. John Michael says that's fascinating. Thank you.
You know, if I can, I'd want to add to something Ryan said. You know, he said that we're not trying to prove or, you know, do that type of stuff. And I think that's an important thing for us in our approach is when someone says, well, are ghosts real? Our answer is yeah, because cultures have words for these. Cultures have traditions for dealing with these things. And to say whether they're real is somewhat problematic because once you have traditions around this, it's real to these people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so again, we're not going out there trying to make judgments, try to prove ghosts are real, skinwalkers are real, anything like that. No, these groups have traditions, they have beliefs. Some of these traditions and beliefs are thousands and thousands of years old. These are real to them. And so we kind of take that approach, and we'll get into that a little bit when we do our presentation, that approach to this.
But we also, I agree with everything that you said. But we also go out and try to actually experience a lot of these things ourselves. That's something that's really important for anthropologists. Go out and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Part of our work is it's participant observation is what it's called, and it means go out and do things, experience the things, so you can talk about them more. So, you know, one of the most spiritual things that some Native groups do is a sweat. And so if you want to learn about a sweat, there's some great books out there. I can recommend them, but I recommend even more, go do it. You'll learn more. And so the same
But yeah,
thing
not with the guy with the blue tarps in Arizona.
Yeah, not with him.
Yeah, no, do it.
Blue tarps do not work well. They kill people. But no, I mean, the same thing holds true when you're looking at studying anything paranormal. So if you want to try to learn about cryptids, go out and look for them. Don't just read about them. Don't just look at the pictures. If you want to learn about ghosts and hauntings, go to some locations and learn about them that way.
Nice. All right. We got another question in the chat. Could you share one of the most fascinating or memorable anecdotes or paranormal stories you gathered from your interviews? Thank you, Autumn.
Ryan, you want to take that one? You did a lot of interviews.
Yeah, that's hard. I did a lot of interviews. We did like nothing but that for like 3 months. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if this is probably going to be a disappointing answer, so I'll just preface with that. But I had this one participant that I interviewed, and she was just this sweet little old lady. She was awesome, and she would just like, I remember she was telling me about, you know, she had this place that she used to go to with her dad, and her dad used to tell her, you know, well, this is where the little people are, and you know, she had all these stories that were associated with, you know, with seeing the little people or things that you did to deal with them or interact with them. And that just really stuck with me just because she was like a fun little old lady to talk to. Like she was just as excited to talk to me as I was to talk to her. So that was very fun. And I think the other thing is like, I guess, okay, this is maybe less disappointing. So the one thing that that really sticks out in my memory from the interviews was somewhat unexpected, and maybe that was naive of me, but like the number of like UFO sightings that people reported, and just like the geographic spread of those really surprised me, because you hear a lot of people talk about seeing UFOs and stuff in the Southwest, like, you know, people in and around Phoenix and in and around Santa Fe and Los Alamos and Area 51 and all of that, you know. But like there were people that I was talking to that were from like the Great Lakes region talking about seeing UFOs and all of that, and that was pretty surprising to me. And I guess the one other thing that I'll talk about is, you know, I had this one guy, you know, you would be talking with people, and I guess this is an important piece of our talk too, I think, or maybe will be, or it will be now, because we're going to talk about it. So I would talk with people, and like I had someone I was interviewing, and she had great stories, and she was telling me about all these experiences and all these, you know, beliefs that she had, and she got to Wendigos, and she was like, you know, I don't talk about those because bad stuff happens when you talk about those. And I had another guy that I talked to, and, one of the things we would open with in this interview was, tell me all the types of phenomena that you believe in. And we kind of had a list that we would kind of prompt them with if they didn't just, start spewing all kinds of things. And one of the things in that list was witchcraft. And this guy was talking about, he's from the Southwest, and he was talking about experiences with witchcraft. And I could tell he was very cagey about certain things that he was telling me. And I think that's one thing that people miss a lot in terms of Indigenous cultures in general, is that, there's some knowledge that isn't just for public consumption. And oftentimes it overlaps with a lot of the stuff about the paranormal because it's all wrapped up in spiritual belief and practices. And so that was one thing too that was interesting for me just as an interviewer. I've done a lot of interviews. That's basically what I do all the time. And it's interesting as an interviewer to like notice those points where it's like, okay, do I push on this a little bit or do I not? And I think that's an important thing for people to remember when they're interacting with these people.
And I'll add, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
No, I was say before I forget. And the other thing, I think Ryan has experienced this too. When you get on some of these sensitive topics, somebody will have very pertinent information, but it's not them. All of a sudden they'll switch to, I have a cousin or an auntie on the other side of the reservation who experienced this. And it was them, but
because there's too many details, way too many
much.
details.
It's not a secondhand story, but because of certain traditions, certain social norms, they can't talk about it that way. So they'll switch it up to a relative or a friend, somebody who you will never run into. And it's their way of sharing that story without putting them in the first person. Because again, you talk about skinwalkers out on the Navajo res, that's going to bring a skinwalker to your house. So people don't know about skinwalkers. They never saw one, but their cousin in Tuba City saw one. Their auntie in Kayenta saw one, not them, because they don't want that to come back on them.
Yeah. Just to throw in just a couple of stories from the interviews. I can't tell you the number of people who talked about how elders from their communities would regularly meet with the Bigfoot, meaning a group of Bigfoot. A lot in Oklahoma in particular. People talking about that this was a regular occurrence, that they would go meet. And I just found that fascinating how many people were talking about things like that. Another, just an example, this is a skinwalker story, so sorry. But there's a...
You're not at my house, so do whatever you want.
And I won't name the university, but it was a tribal university, so all Native students. And I was talking to a Kiowa guy from there, and he was describing how he saw this person walking away from the dorms, like leaving the dorms. And it was late at night. And as he's watching, he said, well, the guy kind of fell down. And as he got up, he was an animal. And he was down on all fours, and he essentially turned into an animal, which is what a skinwalker is in Navajo culture. And I think this guy was willing to talk about it because he was Kiowa, not Navajo. But he said, he watched this animal then leave. And the next day he ran into the guy and like freaked out and didn't want to talk to him. But he had actually seen someone, the way he described it was transform, which, I've never seen that. And I really struggle with it from a biological standpoint. But this is what he told me he saw, and I can't tell him he's wrong. Sean, you've heard some of those Deer Woman stories too.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with Deer Woman, she is a physical human woman, except from the waist down. She's deer, a female deer, and she shows up a lot in southern Kansas, Oklahoma, that area. And what she does is she punishes men who are abusing their wives, their girlfriends, their daughters, things like that. And we know quite a few men who have seen her at events, and they weren't doing anything wrong. They weren't, abusing anyone, but they knew that she was there to punish somebody. And one of our friends told us about a ceremony they were having that they shut down because several people saw a very attractive woman, and when they saw her from the waist down, she was a deer, and they shut this ceremony down and closed up shop, and everyone got the hell out of there. And we're not talking 100 years ago. We're talking, this was 2012, 2013. And to go back to what Chris was saying, yeah, out in Kansas, we knew several women from a group called the Ponca who would tell us they would regularly go out to the prairie at night and visit with Sasquatch, and that he would teach them herbal medicine and traditional healing techniques. So, yeah, and again, that would have been very recent. We're not talking something from settler days. We're talking, you know, these women were driving Ford F-150s out there to meet them and stuff like that. So,
hey, maybe Bigfoot's got an F-150. You probably need it,
Maybe.
In Oklahoma,
got one of the,
Ford in Oklahoma.
He's got one of the good old ones though, not these new.
Nice. Well, I'm team beer woman though. I'll say that.
Yeah, you don't mess with her. You do not mess with her.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you want to learn about, there's an episode of Reservation Dogs if you've ever seen that show about Deer Woman. Great show. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. By the way, Chris, the cat that was back here, that's Toa. She's our youngest.
I see that.
No, that's wonderful. I know. I'll tell you all about my cats at the symposium. Let's see. You got a couple comments in the chat. It's those older generations that have all the good tales. Yes, they do. Let's see. And then looks like Autumn has a follow-up question. How did you go about connecting with people or requesting interviews? Are you putting all these interviews into a book? It would be incredible.
Funny you should say that. Yes. The answer to the second part is yes. This is going to be a book. How we got them? Facebook.
Yeah, no, that's how I get a lot of my interviews too when I'm doing research. Just putting a call out to Facebook and
I mean,
that's the very short and simple answer of how we got all those interviews. let's make that clear.
Well, I mean, first we put out a call through our network, and we have an extensive network. We've done work in over 15 states and kind of, you know, with a lot of different groups around the country. So we put out word through our network. But then as we wanted to sort of fill in the gaps of who we couldn't find, we ran a series of ads in Facebook and. If you're really interested in methods, I go into that in like ridiculous detail, but I'm sure nobody actually cares about that except me.
Chris will keep you on his call till like 2 a.m. telling you about the methods on that thing.
I mean, I'm probably going to pick y'all's brains anyway about interview methodologies anyway, because I'm doing my own side research as well on paranormal beliefs in Japan. So,
oh wow,
yeah.
Cool.
So, because I'm a quarter Japanese, trying to get in touch with, you know, that side of my heritage. But nice. Awesome. Let's see. So just putting a call out to everyone. We have about 16-ish minutes left. So if you have any questions you would like to ask our wonderful guests, this is the time to put them in the chat. So my next question for all of you is, how do you see the relationship between Indigenous spirituality and the modern paranormal field evolving in the future?
Ooh, that's a hard question.
I'll give a positive take. I think I'll probably be the only one that'll give that. So I'll start with a positive take. I mean, I think we're kind of in a really interesting moment. So in terms of just like mass media, there's a lot of people talking about how we're in this sort of native media renaissance and how, you know, we have shows like Res Dogs, you know, being massively popular, and people who like, I mean, my mom, even though I work with Native folks, like she really doesn't know anything about any of it. And she even watched that show and I was like, oh my gosh, Mom, like, you know all sorts of stuff now because that show's really good. And so I think, you know, we have, you know, things like Res Dogs, we have authors like Stephen Graham Jones, Tommy Orange, we have these authors that are talking, or authors and, you know, media people creating all kinds of content, even on TikTok, right? Like there's all kinds of native, supernatural, paranormal TikTok stuff. You know, there's a lot more of that sort of lived contemporary experience that's accessible to people who are not native anymore or not native now. And so I think that's a striking difference now than in the past. And so I think that is a good thing in the sense that people have opportunities to not just like randomly run into a Native person, but to have people who live this and experience it every day talk about it in a way that's accessible. Like we said, the Deer Woman episode on res dogs, I mean, it's great just in terms of, of show writing, but like beyond that, it's awesome as a way to understand what Deer Woman is, and what people's beliefs around it are. And so I think, in the future, I would hope it'd be better than we're at now. I think it would be hard to get worse. But I think there's a lot more information that's accessible now in ways that we didn't have before. You can be scrolling TikTok and end up, in someone's backyard where they're talking about seeing a skinwalker or something. So I think that's cool.
No, go ahead. You were going to talk.
No, I'm not sure how I want to answer that. I do agree with Ryan. Not that I'm that old, but at the same time, when we started doing this, particularly Chris and I, you couldn't talk about this. You couldn't find books on this. I
thought we were crazy for doing.
Yeah. Native people would tell us point blank, don't talk about these things. Don't ask questions about this. So I agree with Ryan. I think some of this is the fact that it's coming from Native communities, Native authors, Native writers, producers, things like that. So I think the fact that it's being driven by Native people is a good thing. I fully agree with Ryan in that. That also keeps it in the Native perspective. So you're not going through 3 translators before it gets out there in the public. I will say, though, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but at the same time I do your homework. A lot of people out there will go and take Native traditions and don't understand what they're doing. And then they'll get upset when they run into a Native person and say, well, I did A, B, and C, and why did they get insulted? Well, because you bastardized something that's thousands of years old from their tradition. You took ownership of it like it was yours.
Smudging.
Sorry. We tell people that all the time. Sage has its use traditionally, but to walk
it's great on turkey.
House,
yes.
Yeah. There you go.
It's true. It is good on turkey. It's great.
It is good on turkey. Makes a good tea too.
It does.
But to walk around your house telling the demon to get out the house and doing
with the windows closed,
turkey
and the door
feather,
closed,
all you're doing is pissing that entity off and pissing Native people off. Or better yet, you're not pissing them off. They're watching this on Travel Channel, all these shows, laughing at you because you're doing it completely wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like
Sage is never used for ridding some place of negative entities. Just I'm putting sage on the turkey.
Good.
Yeah, good, man. Yeah.
That's good. It'll be delicious. That's good. Yeah, I think that's the one caveat I guess I have with like all of the like TikTok stuff and all of that is that it's really easy to take that and then try and put it together piecemeal into some sort of, whether it's spiritual practice or paranormal research practice or whatever it is. And I think that's been done ad nauseum with Native communities for a very long time. And I think in some ways, social media makes that a little bit easier. But I think, like Sean was saying, since it's coming from Native people themselves, I think that helps a little bit, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And I worry about some of the folks going partway down the road towards doing some of this Native stuff, because there are things that you can do that will call negative things towards you. Witchcraft is very prevalent in certain Native communities. I mean, really prevalent. Not witchcraft like Wicca witchcraft, but witchcraft from a Native perspective. It's a different kind of witchcraft, and some of it is more negative. And you piss off the wrong person, and suddenly you've got bad things happening to you. And I worry about people sort of doing that and not doing it because they mean to do something nasty. Not being like, oh, well, I hate Native people, do it, but more not understanding what they're doing and winding up causing bad problems. It's kind of like, when people decide for some unknown reason that they want to try to talk to the demon in the house. You know.
Nice.
Maybe he's a good conversationalist, Chris. Come on.
Sure. Never experienced that. A good conversationalist.
You know, you never know. Nice. So since we're on this topic too, so for the non-Indigenous researchers and investigators out there, what are some best practices for respectfully engaging with Indigenous oral traditions and avoiding unintentionally misrepresenting and sensationalizing these practices?
Talk to people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Talk to people. You know, I think that's at the core of all of it is, you know, take everything you read, take everything that people tell you with a grain of salt. I mean, we've all worked in Indigenous communities for a really long time. You show up as a non-Native person in a Native community. Oftentimes people will tell you stuff that's completely BS just because they want to mess with you, because they're people just like anybody else, you know? And so take everything with a grain of salt, you know, and talk with people who, you know, live and breathe these traditions. I mean, I think that's the core of it. And, you know, never represent it as your own, because it's not. Even if, you know, your 23andMe says you're like 3% Native, you know, it's not. So, yeah.
It doesn't work. Just,
Yeah.
I won't
You know,
go into
to play off that too, this is an investment. People are so used in our culture to having immediate satisfaction. You're not dealing, and I'll throw my own church under the bus, you're not dealing with the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church wants converts. They will engage with you. These are communities that have been historically oppressed for 500 plus years. They have constantly had things taken from them. Just because you have good intentions and walk out onto the res doesn't mean people are going to reciprocate. You need to show your face. You need to show these people that you're there and you're going to be there for a while and you're going to give something too. It's a reciprocal relationship. And again, to go in with that attitude of, well, I want A, B, and C. It's just knowledge. Just give it to me. That's not going to work. You know, you need to be a part of that community as best as you can. And that comes with time. And in Native communities, religion, spirituality is probably one of the last things they're going to share with you.
Yeah.
So that's, it takes a while.
Yeah. See, got a little John Michael's coming in with another zinger here.
That's good though. I think that's what you want, right?
Ideally, right? Right?
Yeah,
I think if they did talk back, we got a problem.
I'm finding myself hoping that John Michael is coming to the symposium and
he's presenting.
Oh,
he's
cool.
presenting, so he'll be there. I'll have to check the schedule and see when, but yeah, he's presenting, so he will be there. Friday night dinner. I have a feeling we're all gonna have a lot to talk about. So nice. And he has a reputation because then we just got that. Nice. All right. So one more question for this group. What do you hope attendees walk away with after hearing your talk at the symposium?
Well, I'm going to be self-serving and say I hope they give us some information. Honestly, we're new to the Pennsylvania landscape and the greater span of things. And so I'm hoping people come to engage with us and share some of their stories to help us out. And again, you know, maybe that's a little self-serving, but, you know, our presentation, we want it to be reciprocal. We want people to, you know, have that banter with us and share things with us. So for me, yeah, I'm hoping people come and say, oh, you need to look at this author, you need to talk to this person, things like that.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, and I'm going to go back to something I said at the very beginning, I'm hoping that people leave realizing that Indigenous beliefs, Indigenous cultures aren't in the past, that they are contemporary and thriving.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I guess I'll jump on there since everybody else talks. So I feel like now I need to say something. I really hope people walk away from the talk, you know, understanding that, you know, working with Indigenous peoples is simultaneously not super easy, but it's also not super hard. That there's like some ways to do it, and if you do it in the right ways, it can be done well. And I think, you know, we experience this in our, you know, regular work, our regular research work all the time, where people, you know, like Sean was saying, people want to try to have this like extractive relationship. And I hope that people kind of understand, you know, have a better grasp of like what that's like in Indigenous communities as it relates to paranormal and spiritual or supernatural stuff.
Nice. Wow. Well, y'all answered that really quickly. So actually, I got another question for you all. That was amazing. What are you most excited about with the symposium?
You want me to go first again?
Go ahead.
Going first?
Got it. You got
They'll
it.
just stare at each other, kind of.
Networking. I want to meet some people around here who do this. Again, you know, I know you got people coming in from all over, but we're kind of siloed here in Western Pennsylvania. I mean, Eastern PA. You know, Chris and I got 2 daughters. Ryan's got a son and a daughter. So, you know, we do a lot of the family stuff, and, you know, we don't often get to go outside our little shell, our little dome, so to speak. So I'm looking forward to interacting with some people who I don't see on a daily basis and may have, you know, new things to share. So
yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, Michelle on that.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of different groups, you know, coming in. Like we do have an archaeologist coming, so just be prepared.
Some of them are okay.
Some of them.
I'm looking forward to you meeting John Sable. I'm gonna be really looking forward to you meeting him. He is a ball of energy. He is a ball of energy. He's probably watching this right now too, maybe. And we have some parapsychologists coming, and we also have researchers and investigators. So we have a pretty diverse group of speakers coming in. So it's going to be really interesting to see you all like converse and chat and connect and network. So it's going to be good stuff. Nice. So for people who are watching right now who may want to get in touch with you or connect with you, or this may have spurred of like, oh, hey, I know somebody or I know an author, where can people find you if they want to connect?
Ryan, Chris, you guys want to go? I hide. I'll be honest with you. You look me up on the internet, you're not going to find much about me. I hide. Those 2 are a little bit more outgoing than me.
So Chris and I just started a podcast. It's called Beyond the Human. It's about the paranormal from an anthropological perspective. It's about a lot of our experiences as investigators, but also as academic researchers, and kind of what that's like living in that space. So you can find us on all of the social places. I also have an Instagram called Mulder's Bookshelf. I like to read a lot. I read a lot of paranormal stuff. So anything you find anything you'd find in his basement office, I like to read and I like to review it. But yeah, like if you Google any of us, you'll find us. I think if there's another Sean Daley who's like a white rapper, that's not this Sean Daley. But
yeah, he's from Wisconsin.
There's another Chris Daley, and she is an assistant women's basketball coach at University of Connecticut, which is incidentally where I got my PhD. So we actually interacted. We used to get each other's emails all the time. Anyway,
I'm the only Ryan Goeckner. So if you Google me, you're only going to find this guy. So
nice. Yeah, and we've been interacting on Instagram, Ryan. When you said Mulder's Bookshelf, I'm like, I know exactly who you are. It's like, wait a minute. Nice. That's awesome. And I just pulled up your podcast on Spotify, so I'm adding. I just followed it, so I'm definitely going to be checking that out.
Yeah, we've only put out 2 episodes so far, so you know.
Well, you know, it's all good, and they're good links too. So you know, I got something to listen to tomorrow at work. So, yeah. So, and John Michael will be there too. He'll be our resident skeptic. You know, presenting. So good stuff. All right. Y'all, this was such a wonderful conversation. It's also energized me in my own research practices. So, you know, it was really neat to get a chance to talk to you 3 before we have a chance to meet in person at the symposium. So thank you all for your time and being here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
All right. And so got a little shout out from Thanks, Tabitha. Thanks for tuning in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take the three of you off the stage. And I'm gonna do my little closing, and then I'll catch you all in about a minute. So, all right, thank you all. All right, there we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. Thank you all for being here this evening. Thanks for watching another episode of our weekly speaker series. Once again, huge thank you to our sponsors, Ghostly Images of Gettysburg, Ghosted Magazine, Gold Dust Publishing, Lauren Hunt, and Booze Sisters Podcast. Huge thank you to our speakers, Sean, Chris, and Ryan, for such an enlightening conversation, and a really important conversation too, about Indigenous perspectives of the paranormal. I was in full agreement with everything they had to say. And you can catch their full presentation at the Paranormal Research Symposium in Gettysburg on August 23rd, 2025. That's just a couple weeks away. I cannot believe it. Tickets are available until August 22nd. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, this is the time to do it, because we may actually sell out. I can't believe I'm actually saying this, which is really cool, because we did not say that last year. So we will see you all next week at 8 p.m. Eastern with our final guest for the speaker series. And until then, stay curious.